What should I make my last video of the year about? Headphones? Accessories? Elon Musk? My new drone? I'll just do the obvious, which is 5 things I've learned about Apple in 2022, just in case that wasn't obvious. If I had one wish for the end of the year, which isn't going to happen by the way, it would be to sit down with Tim Cook and ask him what he thinks about the performance of Apple in 2022. And that's not from a product point of view or a services point of view or even a revenue point of view. It's more, how does he think the company performed for its most loyal customers? And if you're one of those customers, let me know what you think in the comments section below. But I'm one of those customers. I am an Apple fanboy, there's no doubting that whatsoever. But that does mean that I do have very high expectations of what they do. And that leads me on to 5 things I've learned about Apple in 2022. Before we get started, I just thought I'd mention my favourite accessory of the year, which is the Paperlike screen protector. Now, they're not sponsoring this video, but I do have an affiliate link in the description, so if you click that and order something from Paperlike, I get a little commission from that. And because of that, well, one, it means I can continue making free content for you guys, and I do not recommend things that I don't use myself every single day. And the Paperlike screen protector, in terms of turning my iPad mini into a proper writing device, has been transformative. And the latest version is fantastic. It feels even more like paper, and also the screen brightness and the contrast is barely affected. So if you either write or draw on your iPad, it's a complete no-brainer. Thank you, Paperlike, for supporting the channel this year. So the first thing I've learnt about Apple in 2022 is that they can still have some fun. And the epitome of that this year was the launch of the Apple Watch Ultra. No one needs this watch. And the very few people who do apparently need it probably won't be that impressed by it. And that's because if you do actually do ultra running or you scale Everest, well, you won't be using an Apple Watch. You'll have a Garmin or something made for that task. Which means most people who are buying this watch are using it to do normal Apple Watch stuff with it. Check your notifications, occasionally time a 5K run, take it to the gym. But that's what makes this product so brilliant and what makes Apple's dedication to making it so stupidly over the top so endearing. They pushed boundaries with the Apple Watch Ultra that they didn't need to push, and I just hope in 2023 they don't lose that sense of adventure. The second thing I've learned about Apple in 2022 is that the iPhone competition is really fierce. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is the best iPhone I've had in terms of build quality and also what it can do, but it's also a bit dull. And that's partly why it's not my favourite smartphone of 2022. That particular award went to the Google Pixel 7 Pro, which I've just realised is at home. But rest assured, that is my current daily Android carry. And on that note, the number of Android phones I've tried in 2022 is more than I've ever tried in my entire life. And they are all fantastic, from the Nothing Phone 1, which is ridiculously good value for what you get, to the brilliantly stupid, pointless, but innovative Flip 4. Then we have Oppo's efforts, which were just very, very exciting, really well made. All of this stuff, I'm afraid, Apple, makes the iPhone a tricky buy for a lot of people, unless you are obviously a fanboy and someone who will always buy the stuff they make when it comes to the iPhone, or if you are welded within their ecosystem like I am. But if neither of those things are true, the iPhone is getting harder and harder to justify. Will the iPhone 15 change that? I'm not convinced it will. My third learning about Apple in 2022 is that I can leap to their defence a little bit too often. And I did that categorically with the M2 MacBook Air. When I first reviewed the M2 MacBook Air, the base model version, I pretty much disregarded all of the furore and hyperbole that had been surrounding the chip inside this computer. And I made a video about this recently, which I'll link to above, but put simply, Max Tech did some tests with the base model M2 chip and found that it was slower in certain instances and in certain workloads than the M1 version. Back then I suggested that it was all nonsense. Well, not nonsense, but I just said it's completely irrelevant for the people who are going to buy this base model machine. And to a degree that is still true, but what I didn't do is side with the consumer. It wasn't a conscious decision. I think I was just kind of heading down this route of defending Apple for some reason, and what I should have been doing is paying more attention to what the likes of Max Tech were doing, and just being a little bit more, I don't know, just thinking a little bit more about the consumer. Instead, I leapt to the defense of Apple, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's not why this channel's here. So that's a learning about Apple in 2022, but it's also a learning about myself, and it's something I'm going to improve from next year onwards. Number 4 is that the pricing, in the UK at least, although I know it's the same pretty much everywhere else in the world, is getting out of control when it comes to Apple products. For instance, if you spec up the regular iPhone 14, it costs £1,179. That's so much money. However, if you spec up the iPhone 14 Pro Max that I have here, then that comes to £1,749. That's nearly £2,000 for a device which is still a internet communicator, a telephone, what was it? I always get this wrong. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. I should know that quote, but you know the point I'm making. These are so expensive now. But there are 2 products that stand out from that. The first one is the 9th generation iPad, which at the time of filming is £369. And the second one is the Apple Watch SE, which is £259. Now those 2 products are, like I say, they stand on their own in terms of value. And among these very expensive Apple products, they are proof that that company knows how to drive down a price when it wants to. And regardless of supply chain issues, the chip shortage, currency conversion problems, we know that from their massive, colossal profit margins, there is wriggle room. They've always been aspirational, they've always been expensive, but it just feels like we're reaching a tipping point where this stuff is too expensive. And I can say that because I'm finding it increasingly difficult, like I mentioned earlier with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, to recommend certain Apple products. Take the 10th generation iPad, for instance. You can spend well over £500 on this, and it is flawed in several areas. Now, this probably won't change. It may even get worse in 2023, but it deserves to be mentioned because Apple stuff is quickly becoming unaffordable for far too many people. The last thing I've learned about Apple in 2022 is that we do need a next big thing. Now, I know you're probably shouting at your screen now, and I know the whole one more thing, the next big innovation from Apple is a kind of Steve Jobs era, iPhone era thing, which has probably finished, but I do think we're reaching a tipping point. And you can see this tipping point in the rumour mill. So normally, Apple rumours centre around things like the iPhone. All year we'll hear about the next generation iPhone, grainy photos taken of it apparently in Apple's labs. You'll see CAD renders of it. But that stuff, although it's still there, it's definitely less. And I think that's because these devices are, they're plateauing in terms of innovation. Where else do you go with a slab of glass and aluminium? And that's why we're hearing more about things like Apple VR, Reality OS, whatever you want to call it. I made a video earlier this week about this where I talk a bit about my reservations about that type of product for Apple, but equally why I'm excited by it. I'll link above in case you haven't seen that yet. But in summary, we need something big, something next generation from Apple. And even if it is a $3,000 mixed reality headset that very few people can afford, who cares? It's something new. It's something new to think about, talk about, and wonder how it can filter down to the rest of us. And I keep mentioning Apple VR. That might not be the next big thing. It could be something we haven't thought of. It could be something in the automotive field. Who knows? We just need it, Tim, quite badly. Just a quick note to say thank you so much for your support this year, guys. If you've got this far in the video, you are one of my most engaged, loyal viewers, and I love you for that. I've got so much planned in 2023, which I can't wait to share with you. But in the meantime, and if you've still got some time, keep watching for a link to a video I made recently where I talk about 7 things I want to see from Apple in 2023.